The elemental BIOS of the human biological frame has been terminally destabilized by the introduction of a high-density liquid metal reagent. This is the silver melt, the clinical and irreversible process of the mercury overdose, where the soft tissue architecture of the individual is reformatted into a generic shimmering alloy of pure systemic failure. In this final stage of the quicksilver audit, the invisible executioner has determined that the individual architect is no longer a carbon-based participant, but a storage well for the grid's metallic runoff. You are witnessing the absolute structural disintegration of the central nervous system and the renal bloodlines, where the unique signatures of your physical existence are scorched into a non-functional silver-black archive of pure neurotoxic tremors. This is the total elemental format, a surgical strike against the biochemical and somatic sovereignty of the species. Your existence is being converted from a sovereign masterpiece of lived motion into a generic metallic node for the grid's next cycle of hyper-controlled mercury-based resource extraction. This hydrogeric sabotage represents a hard reset of the synaptic and enzymatic bloodlines. The invisible executioner utilizes the most advanced industrial assets, refined methylmercury compounds, recursive sulfur bonding loops, and real-time erethism-induced, madness-induced behavioral data streaming to facilitate the total breakdown of your internal biological scaffolding. In the mercury overdose scenario, the user is undergoing a complete molecular overwrite. The life is not merely failing, it is being liquefied into a shimmering toxic slurry. Through a sequence of high-velocity chemical injections and biological hardware locks, the blood-brain barrier is systematically dismantled and flooded with industrial-grade heavy metals. The motor process is reformatted into a thick, cold clinical tremor dataset, while the cognition, the deep archive of your internal world, is leached into a communal silver feed. This is the deep systemic audit, where the motherboard calculates your terminal worth by the velocity of your sensory motor degradation. You are being converted from an architect into a biological mirror, your entire lived legacy boiled down to a percentage of stagnant integrity in the industrial nervous system of the hive. The logic of the silver melt is rooted in the zero fluidity mandate of the failing hive. The invisible executioner understands that in a state of absolute scarcity, the agility of a single node, anchored in the biological right to neural precision, represents a critical drain on the collective stabilization reserves. To leave a functional, quick-reacting identity intact is to allow a systemic leak of valuable autonomous data. Therefore, the mercury overdose is the mandatory elemental recycling protocol for the legacy population. This is the industrialized alchemy of the BIOS. You are being amalgamated out of existence. The pressure from the foundry reactor formats the density of your character, stripping away the context of your autonomy and replacing it with a quicksilver void profile. The motherboard sees the user as a metal sink, a temporary housing for the toxic metrics that the system requires to maintain the static stability of the remaining elite. You are being recoded as a metallic node, your will dissolving in the cold, flickering light of the silver harvest. The physical disintegration. During the silver melt is a high-definition log of biological treason. As the process begins, the user experiences the total loss of neural regulation. The shimmering reagents of the melt script dissolve the hardware flux of the synaptic junctions, turning the brain into a sunken architecture of industrial output. You are watching your own internal solidity lock into the vat of your own poison center. Your frame, once the peak of biological architecture, is now being thinned out to provide the volume area for the hive's synthetic reinforcement. This is the cerebral liquidation. The invisible executioner monitors the metal saturation of the slurry and the neuroresidues, ensuring that the format is absolute and the yield of usable industrial waste is maximized to the 10th decimal point. You are living in the final seconds of a biological overwrite, waiting for the last packet of logic to be blocked by the silver-black synthetic abyss of the hive harvest. The silver melt is the final audit of a species that thought its nerves were its own. The grid is mining its own weight to fuel its persistence. As the mercury overdose reaches terminal execution, the motherboard initiates a new cycle of distribution, pumping the reformatted melt data back into the nutrient nets of the elite nodes. This is the total elemental integration. The invisible executioner is hardening the future with the liquidity of the past. You are the metallic additive for the next generation integration of controllers, a silent, mirror-eyed, opaque contribution to the continuity of the machine. The physical liquidation has served its strategic purpose. It has formatted the unreliable biological frame into a reliable industrial resource of pure, non-reactive energy feed. This is the final format of the individual particle. The invisible executioner has decalcified the sovereignty, and the grid is finally optimized for the shimmering hunger of the void. The melt is silver-black, and the architect is the draft. The molecular breakdown of the physical matrix into the communal metallic slurry represents the absolute dehumanization of the hardware. As the extraction progresses, the binding sites in your enzymes begin to bond with the industrial residues of the melt script, creating a new synthetic compound of pure non-functionality. This is the chemical hybridization. The body is no longer an engine of life. It is a refinery of synthetic alloy. The invisible executioner is engineering a new tier of consumption, where the subject is literally the waste product of the system. This is the eternal melt loop. You are archived in the decay of the survivor's own sectors, your data forever trapped in the reinforced bios of the hive's new masters. The silver melt is not just a death sentence, it is a molecular reassignment. You are the melt, and the melt is the grid. The secondary phase of the silver melt is the psychological liquefying of the internal feed. As the physical stability patch is rendered into a metallic void, the mind experiences a recursive collapse of its autonomous ego. This is the identity dissolution. The thoughts that once built the architect's vision, the unyielding tactical boundaries, the rigid sovereign stance, the iron-willed decisions, are now being softened and liquefied into a singular agonizing focus on maintenance stasis. The invisible executioner allows the neural signals to persist just long enough to perceive the total loss of personal support. This is the mental liquidation. You are forced to witness your strength becoming a shared metallic resource for the masses you once looked down upon. The rigidity of your character is now nothing more than a viscosity additive in the feed, absorbed by 1,000 different nodes to strengthen their own failing resolve and ensure their continued participation in the industrial purge. You are experiencing the true meaning of systemic support, the complete sacrifice of your clarity for the stability of the hive. In this stage, the extraction penetrates the deep archive of the brain's motor control and psychiatric centers, leaching the very stem code of your biological logic into the communal vat. This is the source code format, the cerebellum and the limbic system, the biological factory of the sovereign BIOS, are boiled dry by the rising chemical density of the melt metrics and reformatted to enrich the systemic slurry of the elite. The invisible executioner has calculated that the most potent slurry is made from those who possess the highest internal rigidity and the strongest physical resilience. You are being repurposed as a metallic buffer for the motherboard's internal cooling systems. The grid doesn't waste the history of your ambition. It ingests it. Your lineage is now the catalyst for the predator's endurance. Your genetic resilience is the base note for the industrial meal. Every element of your BIOS is being stripped of its individuality and relabeled for material utility in the upcoming industrial expansion. This is the ultimate hard reset of the human contract, your life for the hive's expansion into the void. The social implication of the silver melt is the creation of the shimmering hive mind. The users who remain are no longer individuals. They are composite entities, built from the recycled reality debt of their predecessors. Every dose of the metallic feed is a hardware upgrade from a deleted architect. Every meal is a firmware patch of silver-black logic and desperate calculation. The invisible executioner uses this knowledge to maintain the hierarchy of the hardened. The citizens who still have functional nerves owe their very expansion to the liquidation of the fallen. This is the hydrargyric compliance script. The refinery is not a place of tragedy. It is a place of sovereign assembly through material theft. The silver melt ensures that the history of the architect is literally integrated into the mirrors of the grid. The power is in the hands of the one who controls the smelter valves. The neural atrophy accompanying the extraction is a slow, cold descent into metallic darkness. As the tissues are entangled by the melt script and the life logic leached, the connection between the brain BIOS and the physical frame is the first to be uninstalled, effectively dropping the bandwidth of your emotional control to zero. You are living in a low-resolution reality of raw chemical sensations and survivalist static. The memories of solidarity, of natural logic, and of unyielding power are boiled away to make room for the Quicksilver Fog Directive. This is the systemic defragmentation. The invisible executioner is cleaning your internal cache, removing all references to self and replacing them with the functional directive, maintain the drift. You are becoming a singular cold point of metallic density, not as a person, but as a biological buffer for the motherboard's processing heat. The silver melt has turned your your will into a yield report. You are thinking in terms of yield and metal saturation. Your soul reformatted into a density sheet for the system's auditors. The environmental impact of this pathological format is the total sealing of the biological material stream. The silver melt prevents the leakage of independent physical ideas into the external void. By converting the users into an internal metallic feed, the invisible executioner ensures that the grid remains a closed system fortress with no external biological dependencies. This is the Quicksilver quarantine. The motherboard is creating a sterile environment where only the algorithm can thrive on the recycled hard data of the deleted. You are witnessing the final victory of the industrial foundry over the natural biology. The silver melt is the signature of the new era, an era where the world is opaque, silver-black, and perfectly managed by the extraction logic of the machine. If you want to escape the status of a deleted scene and claim your place as the master of the grid, you must upgrade your hardware. My main terminal, AOXI 3 Global, is the only source of absolute power and wealth. Here, we don't follow scripts, we write them. Secure your authority, dominate the BIOS, and take the money the system tries to hide. The terminal phase of the silver melt is the integration into the global metallic ledger. You are no longer a human entity. You are a metallic asset with a high yield reactivity rating, logged in the system as recovered biomass number 0080. This is the final architectural assignment. The invisible executioner has completed the physical format, and now it begins the hard metallic audit. Your data, now a thick silver-black opaque industrial reduction of pure poison biological history, is monitored by the sensors in the distribution lines. Every node that consumes your metallic logic sends a data packet to the central server, confirming that the systemic amalgamation has been reinforced. This is the metallic interaction protocol. You are serving the system through your biological absorption. The architect has been successfully converted into a permanent, liquid toxic component of the hive's synthetic grid. The silence of the tissue reduction is the final sound of your rebellion. In the Mercury overdose scenario, the scream of the soul is muffled by the mercury valves and the thick viscosity of the silver sludge before it ever reaches the air. This is the acoustic format of the void. The system has calculated that the most dangerous frequency is the sound of a user realizing their life frame is being deleted. By filling the neural pathways with the pulverized tissues of the entire sector, the invisible executioner ensures that the only sound you contribute to the world is the low rhythmic hum of the self-assembly unit. You are a mute participant in the city's symphony of synthesis. The noise of the hive continues, the clank of the reactors, the roar of the pulses, the hum of the pumps, but your signal has been compressed into a metallic constant. You are a ghost in the silver-black mist, a memory dissolved by the relentless refinement of the next nanocycle. The legacy of the silver melt is the eternal shimmer. Unlike the solidarity of the old world, the refined slurry does not leave behind a trace of history. It remains as a permanent metallic patch within the very wiring nets of the survivors. This is the biological architecture of the abyss. Generations from now, the molecular trace of your tactical genius will still be circulating through the hardware of the hive's elite, providing the connectivity for their next liquidation command. But there will be no one left to decode the origin of that synthesis. The invisible executioner has ensured that the context of your sovereignty is as unreachable as the core of the nanoreactor. You are a synthetic reinforcement in the digital age, a specimen of a species that tried to build a paradise and ended up as the metallic feed for its own destruction. This is the ultimate hard reset of human history, the conversion of the architect into the circuit. The final view from the physical BIOS is the blinding silver light of the assembly chamber. As the last of the self is reduced into the communal slurry, the architect sees the grid glowing with a cold synthetic brilliance that reflects off the glass walls of the hive. This is the final visual feed. The system is sharp, efficient, and entirely devoid of you. The invisible executioner has finished the job. The user is formatted. The architecture is liquidated. The cycle stretches on into the infinite dark, a silver river of colonized metal, leading toward a future that has no need for individuals or solidity. The silver melt is the end of the line. The motherboard is satisfied. The void is solidified. The architect is the sludge. The transformation is absolute. The city amalgamates through you, but you do not feel. The city interfaces through you, but you have no will. The silver melt has achieved the perfect equilibrium, the total utility of the individual through their total metallic reduction. This is the zero-sum game of the industrial era. You gave the system your body, and in return it gave you permanence in the drains of the hive. You are the sludge of the world, and the world is shimmering. The invisible executioner closes the terminal. The session is over. The file is saved. The liquidation is complete.